Greetings, students of the Force, and welcome back to the channel. The galaxy is home to trillions and billions of species, each with their own unique society and culture. According to recent analysis, somewhere around 68 per 1 million people in the galaxy are Force sensitive, a very low number indeed. In fact, out of trillions of beings, there were only about 100,000 Jedi during the era of the Clone Wars. As you know, Force sensitivity is not only hereditary, but also moves with certain species as well. This was a known fact, and it's clear that we do indeed see a certain imbalance of species populating both the Jedi as well as the Sith orders. Well, today, we wanted to actually take a look at some of the genealogy records and see what exactly the species were with the most attunement to the Force. We did our best to try and place these species in order of least to most likely to be Force sensitive, or at least their Force sensitivity. Some were clearly higher, while others sort of floated around the same area. Nevertheless, we hope you join us in our little biology tour as we look at the top 7 most Force-sensitive beings in the Star Wars galaxy. First though, according to our charts, many of you that visit our archives have not yet subscribed, and have yet to officially join our order, so if you've been enjoying the daily openings of holocrons, reach out with the Force and crush that subscribe button. Now, let us begin. At 7, we have Ethorians, one of the most easily recognizable species in Star Wars. Ethorians were rather large beings with a long neck and a T-shaped head that held their eyes on either side. Ethorians were most well known for having 2 mouths and 4 throats that allowed them to let out sounds of extremely loud volumes. Despite this though, Ethorians were remarkably peaceful as a race that valued good-heartedness and good-naturedness and commonality. They worshipped nature itself and were traditionally more adherent to the light side of the Force. Force sensitivity was always a very large part of their culture as a whole, and back in the day, they had many tribes on their planet, each led by a Force sensitive who was fully in tune with the nature that surrounded them. With enough Force sensitives born at once at a time, that led them to several tribes, we can reasonably deduce that the birth date of a Force sensitive Ethorian was much higher than most species in the galaxy. This was clear by the fact that a great many Ethorians joined the Jedi Order, as they admired the beliefs and the Jedi Code, and found it very much in line with their own societal standards. If any of their members fell short of their peaceful ways, and decided to be selfish or aggressive, they were shunned and cast out of Ethorian society. Despite this though, there have been close to no Ethorian Sith Lords in all of galactic history. The most notable Ethorian Jedi would be Roran Korub, and was one of the last lines of defense against General Grievous during the Battle of Coruscant, ultimately giving his life to protect the Chancellor. The next species we have at number 6 is the Kel Dor. Hailing from the planet of Dorian, the Kel Dor were another race of beings that were starkly drawn to the light. Much like the race of Ethorians, one would be hard-pressed to find a Kel Dor that wouldn't treat you with the utmost kindness and gratuity. The Kel Dor society was that of kind but practical sort. They held close to the value of never turning away a stranger in need, and they were quite known for their hospitality. However, their pragmatism extended to their ideas concerning justice as well. The Kel Dor saw morality distinctly as black and white, while they would help anyone who asked of them. They were not known to hesitate when putting to death a thief, even if the thief was stealing for his own survival. Force sensitivity was quite prevalent in the Kel Dor race. Much like the Iktashi, they were a natural telepath and could transmit small messages or read the minds of weak-willed others. Though a Force-sensitive Kel Dor could greatly amplify these powers, society was led by nobility who mostly adhered to the word of the Barandu sages. Unlike the Jedi, the Barandu sages were indeed a group of Force sensitives, but were not in any way militant whatsoever. Initially, their power centered around weather prediction, but as the Barandu sages learned more of the Force, they realized that they had an affinity for detecting and subsequently preventing dangerous events. Wars and disasters were often averted simply by the insight of the Barandu sages. Interestingly enough, the Barandu sages and the Jedi had somewhat rocky beginnings, despite both allying with the light side. The sages were more conservative with their use of the Force and thought of the Jedi as eccentric wizards. But as time grew on, both parties saw the need for each other, and some of the best Jedi to come out of the Order had the beginnings as Barandu sages. Obviously, the most famous Force sensitive to come from this race is the Kun family. Plo Koon and his niece, Sha Kun, were very powerful and exceptionally talented Jedi. And again, much like the Ethorians, one would struggle a great deal to find any of the Kel Dor that joined the ranks of the Sith. Though in legends, they speak of one, but we do not know his name. Now, moving on to the darker side of things, we have number 5 at the Zabraks and the Dathomirians. We decided to lump these two together since Dathomirians are essentially an offshoot of the Zabraks. The species are closely related to one another and both are native to Dathomir. The planet of Dathomir itself is very strong with the Force, and almost every one of its inhabitants are born Force sensitive. This is exceedingly rare. Zabrak males have quite a bit of Force sensitivity, especially the Night Brothers, whose tribes intermingle with the Night Sisters quite often. Almost, if not all of Dathomirian females are Force sensitive, as the Night Sisters are made up of these witches who have managed to connect with the flowing river of Ichor that runs through the very veins of Dathomir. Dathomirians are naturally more turned to the dark side. However, there have been plenty of Zabrak Jedi through the years that have proven to be quite powerful, such as Jedi Ethkoth, who was a Jedi High Council member and a survivor of Order 66. Ethkoth managed to defeat General Grievous despite having been shot in the arm prior to his duel. Another famous Jedi is Kaosendarach, the master of Satil Shan, who managed to take on 2 Sith Lords at once in his final moments, and even managed to mortally wound Darth Vindican before he was slain by his apprentice, Darth Malgus. 2 of the most famous Zabrak Sith would of course be Darth Maul and Savage Opress, and as far as Dathomirians go, the Night Sister Coven was worthy of Palpatine's respect and ultimately his fear. Dathomir was one of the planets that the Thoyor had rested on back in the days when the Jedi Order began, and it would be many of these witches that would migrate to Tython and become part of the very first Jedi Order. Next, we have one of my favorite at number 4 in the Sith Purebloods, an ancient race that predates the Jedi Order itself. The Sith Purebloods of Korriban were the ancestors to the Sith Order, and their population was very heavily Force sensitive. Though untrained, many of the Force sensitives of their tribes would rise through the ranks and became fearsome warriors due to their innate physical advantages as well as their connection to the darkness. Throughout history, the Sith race would grow in power, with mystics and sorcerers also arising from their people. These sorcerers became powerful and would cast horrifying spells and conjure mystifying objects and creatures through alchemy, which they invested in their endless tribal wars that the Sith race ultimately would often indulge in. The Sith respected power and power alone, and only those strong enough in the dark side could rise up and become their kinds. Among the most powerful of these Sith purebloods would be King Adus, Marka Ragnos, Naga Sadow, and the Jedi named Seknos Wrath. Any of the Sith purebloods that weren't born Force sensitive were either made slaves or they were alchemically altered in order to become much stronger than before, being turned into what is known as the Masasi warriors. Next, we have perhaps the most dangerous Force sensitive race in the Rakata. Recently, we did an entire video covering the Rakata and exactly how terrifying their infinite empire was, and talked about their rise and fall in the galaxy, but for here we will do a quick recap. The Rakatans were once a slave race that were known as the Builders, and they served alongside a few other races to the Celestials long before the Republic was formed, and long before the Jedi and Sith. After their revolt, the Rakatans used their knowledge of the Force to tap into the dark side, and they created many machines that were powered exclusively by the Force itself. They made primordial hyperdrives, weapons, and even the very first lightsabers, which at the time were called Force Sabers, and could only be activated using the dark side. The Rakatan Empire quickly spread, and they would go around conquering entire worlds while enslaving or cannibalizing the population. The Rakata would actually be the ones responsible for the Sith purebloods' fall to the dark side, as when they visited Korriban, they spread their influence before being driven off by the might of King Adus. Eventually though, after an unsuccessful campaign against the Jedi Order, the Infinite Empire would crumble due to the mysterious virus that began to infect all Rakatans. You see, we are led to believe that all the Rakata were Force sensitive just as a species trait, every single one of them. However, this virus began to sever them from the Force until they no longer had the strength of their former selves. The species is now almost completely extinct, and those that do remain, descendants of the Infinite Empire, are still left without the ability to touch the gifts of the Force, perhaps a punishment for their previous transgressions. At number 2, we have humans. This should come as no surprise, as it has been stated before that many of humans are born with some of the most potential of any being in the galaxy when concerning the gifts of the Force. Unlike most species, which often have more definitive characteristics, humans seem to vary widely from one specimen to the next. One thing is for certain though, the Force seems to move around humans quite a bit, as a very good portion of the Jedi and Sith in history have been human. Even Darth Plagueis himself admitted at one point that he believed that humans could possibly hold the destiny of the galaxy itself due to their eagerness to never stay in one place and a desire to expand to all reaches of the galaxy. Humans derived from the ancient civilization known as the Zel, who were native to Coruscant. Also in this category, we have to place the Coronani, which were a human race native to the planet of Corran. This species is actually where Mace Windu is from, and the entirety of the Coronani were all Force sensitive. Not much is known about the Coronani other than the old tale that they were all descended from a powerful Jedi who crash landed on the planet of Corran sometime during the Sith War. I find it incredibly interesting that this species, like the Rakata, were all Force sensitive, but of course, there still remains one species that stands out from the rest of them. And finally, at number 1, we have Yoda's species. This one was an obvious pick for our number 1 spot, and what can we say? Every member of Yoda's species has not only been an extremely powerful Force sensitive, but has been starkly adherent to the light side. We have done quite a few videos breaking down the various aspects of Yoda's species, and this one fact is the constant. We only know of 6 members so far: Oteg, Yaddle, Grogu, Vandar Tarke, Minch, and of course Yoda himself. Though some of our researchers share the opinion that perhaps even Minch and Yoda are the same person. Either way, we have witnessed the members of this species do incredible things and display feats of the Force that are only rivaled by the Chosen One at times. The species remains a total mystery, but it is clear that it shares the traits that the Rakata and the Corani have as well. They are all Force sensitive without exception. So my friends, what did you think of our list? Is it fascinating that entire species can be more or less in tune with the Force than another? And it creates interesting scenarios when we find species that are more adherent to one side of the Force or the other. But let us know down below which of the species we discussed today is your favorite. And as always, may the Force be with you, and I hope that you have a great day.